Good evening, everyone, to our small audience, but high-quality audience here, and to everyone listening from abroad or from afar on YouTube or on Facebook. I am very happy to start our session, which is also the last session of the beautiful Israeli pavilion here in COP27. It was quite a journey for me personally, and we will speak a little bit afterwards of our panelists' impressions of this experience in the COP. My name is Roni Erez, and I am the co-director of the Heschel Center for Sustainability, an NGO working in Israel for promoting sustainability from a social, economical point of view. So we're gathered today to speak about just transition. It's a little bit maybe off topic to the Israeli pavilion, as the beautiful presentations that had been occurring here in the past 2 weeks were mainly focused on research, on technology, on these kind of solutions that we in Israel would like to promote maybe to the world. And there was, in my opinion, not enough talk about what we in Israel are going to do for ourselves, and what are we going to do for marginalized communities, what are we going to do in order to make this transition to low-carbon economy be just and fair and include everyone that need to be included and leave no one behind. So this panel has been constructed after a beautiful long process, about a year, that we've been doing with other organizations, with Shatil and other organizations, that the aim of it was to bring more people into the conversation about climate, and to bring more people, more organizations, more causes into this conversation about the transition to a low-carbon economy. The participants for this project that we were looking for were social change organizations that are not from the environmental scene. We were trying to engage non-environmental social change organizations, organizations about health, about refugees, about workers that we're going to hear from later on. And I'm very happy to say that it was a fascinating year. It was a fascinating process. Me personally, I was surprised even by how bold and ambitious the initiatives that the people participating in the process came up with. And yeah, we're going to hear some about them. We're going to have some short presentations from our panelists, and then we're going to have an open discussion. I'm not even going to call it a panel, but more like an open discussion about just transition, about democratization of the process, about hearing different voices, about including more people in the conversation. So it's going to be a fascinating panel, and I'm very happy for all of you being here. I think each panelist will just grab the mic and introduce themselves, so it'll be a little less formal and a little bit more paced. Thank you. Yes? This one.
I'll present in a minute, but I'm Micha Price. I'm from the Said Al-Kharoumi initiative. It's an initiative that started in the late stages of last year, and the idea is and the main objective of the initiative is to basically increase the participation of disempowered and disenfranchised community within Israeli society.
So I'm Reuma Schlesinger. I'm from Power to the Workers, a democratic workers organization in Israel.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Meital Peleg Mizrahi. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Public Policy in Tel Aviv University. I'm the coordinator of regional cooperation cluster and sustainable lifestyle cluster in Tel Aviv University Climate Center. And I'm also the coordinator of green employment in Life and Organization, which is the umbrella organization of the environmental movement in Israel. I know that's a long intro.
Hello, my name is Elodie Jacquet. Hello, my name is Elodie Jacquet. I work with the Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University in Canada. I'm a public engagement practitioner, and I also convene something called the International Climate Engagement Network. And our purpose is to really promote participatory methods of engagement so that the voices, particularly of those who have been ignored in government processes, are brought into decision making. So we do a lot of projects related to that with different levels of government, but we also work with researchers and communities.
Hello, my name is Man Fang. I'm Chinese living in Germany. My background is psychologists, psychotherapists, and policy advisor. I've been staying in China working for Chinese government, Beijing government for almost 9 years, and then moved to Europe. And now I'm the affiliate scholar in IISS, Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies. And also, I have launched a company which is doing the transculture, also transdisciplinary consulting, and we are training the trainers.
So I'm completing our round here. My name is Thomas Brun. I'm from Germany, and I'm a research group leader at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, where you are also the affiliate scholar. I'm trained as a physicist originally, but 10 years ago I joined the ISS, and somehow over the time I transformed a little bit, because the mission of our institute is not only to do research on sustainability, but primarily connect stakeholders from different backgrounds to address complexity together. And basically, as I will share later, my learning journey is it's not about lacking knowledge, it's more about connecting people and helping people from different backgrounds listen to each other. So also I ended up doing psychology in the last couple of years because the physicist was kind of overwhelmed with helping people really connect meaningfully. Yeah, that's how I'm here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much for your introductions. Now I think we're going to hear a little bit more deep dive into each one of your perspectives and your project that you've been working on. So yeah, as you understand, half of our panelists are from Israel working on local projects, and the other half are very welcome guests from international establishments working on participatory and dialogue and these kind of methods of bringing new voices into the discussion. So yeah, Micha, please start. Tell us about your initiative.
It's the last panel, so everything is
סבבה, אז אני פשוט אדבר עם זה. Okay, so thank you very much. Like I mentioned, we're in the Seidel. It works. יפה. So like I said, we're from the Seidel Harumi initiative. What we're basically trying to do is, one you mentioned, that there's a lot of initiatives that came here together from civil society, etc., that aren't necessarily part of the environment, and I agree with that, and that's also part of the, I think, optimistic and inspiring message that we can get from a lot of things that we're seeing around us in general in the COP, that we're understanding that the environment isn't just, trees and ecology. The environment is actually the way that the solutions and the questions that we're asking and our survival and our health and well-being intersects with everything from economy and society and education and mental health, etc. And exactly because of that, we decided to launch this initiative a little bit over a year ago with the understanding that even though we have a lot of innovation in Israel, and Israel really is a technologically innovative country, we are much less, we're less known and less successful with our implementation efforts. And one of the ideas that the initiative is trying to advance is that there are innovative ways to basically implement the technologies that are already existing, and all we have to do is look around and see what the opportunities are and take them. So the principle that guides the Sayyid al-Kharoomi initiative is that solar energy by its very nature is decentralized. And unlike conventional forms of energy, given that we know that we're facing an energy revolution in Israel, whether it'll take 15, 20, 30, or 40 years, energy is going to be decentralized. And because it's decentralized, we can break the conventional model of monopolization of the production mechanisms and also of the input. And traditionally the input is is either coal or gas or fuel, and it's turned into energy via a centralized power system. But with solar energy, basically the only input that we need is the sun, and our power stations are basically the solar panels. And because of that, we understand that through solar energy, we can create a much more democratic and democratized energy system that can be much more inclusive and much more participatory, and people can actually take charge and self-determine how they want to consume their energy, how they want to produce their energy. And that's one of it's one of the new things that we can see that we're having with solar energy, is that it can be a self-determined form of energy. So like I said, our vision is to increase the access and participation of disempowered and disenfranchised communities via the use of renewable energy. Now, we're doing it via three main models. Okay, the first one is we are phasing out generators. Now, I'll touch on the generators in a second. The second one is we want to advance Bedouin-owned and operated solar fields. Now, the Bedouin community is almost 40% of the Negev. That is the projection for 2030. They're almost 40% of the Negev, and yet there's only one Bedouin solar field in all of Israel, and the likelihood of there being more solar field is not something that's going to happen unless somebody makes a proactive choice to make that a reality. And there are obstacles at either end. On one end, because of the historic and, to put it lightly, complex relationship between the state of Israel and its Arab minority, and at the other hand, the connection to the grid, which makes the solar energy viable. There are a lot of obstacles that we're trying to overcome, and through that we can increase the participation. The third thing is we want to create desert energy communities, and the desert energy communities here, well, just for a second, I just want to switch to explain the rationale for that. Okay, so 65% of the Bedouins in the unrecognized villages are already by default, you can see here on the left, are already by default using solar energy with storage as their primary source of energy. Now, what we're saying is, okay, this is something that is an existing fact on the ground, that 65% of the people are using their energy, solar energy, and we're asking how can we leverage that existing fact and turn it into something that's established to catalyze further use and deployment of energy, and to basically leapfrog the need to use dirty energies to begin with. And the answer that we came up with is this. In the unrecognized villages in Israel, there are schools and kindergartens, and these schools and kindergartens are operated and owned by the Israeli government. Now, this is a really, really unique position, that you have villages with no recognition, but with schools, because the universal education law is so powerful in Israel. So what we're saying is, okay, these schools that are off-grid and are currently using harmful and polluting generators, we can replace those systems, and we can replace the fact that they also don't have any sanitation. We can replace these systems with sustainable alternatives. Right now, we are building, as we speak, and it'll be done this February, we're building off-grid solar panels with storage to basically create independent energy islands. And the idea is that once we create that, we can create an anchor in the desert, in these communities, from which we can start stretching and connecting homes all over the Negev, Okay. The second component is we're advancing agrivoltaic women-led cooperatives in the Bedouin community. I do want to explain for a second why this is why it's important to work specifically with the cooperative model. Kibbutzim and moshavim are technically agricultural cooperatives. And because they are agricultural cooperatives, they have the legal right according to Israel law, to gain access to agricultural land. Now, anyone who deals with energy knows that the question of where do you put the panels, that is the most important question, and the question of access to land is a direct continuation of that question. So where do you put the panels in Israel? As of now, all the panels in Israel that are on open land are on land that belongs to kibbutzim and moshavim because they have the legal right to apply for this agricultural land. Now, what we're doing now is we're actually working together with Bedouin NGOs and other organizations in the Negev to form legal cooperatives by Arab minorities, led by women, and once we create that legal entity, we are basically creating the first model by which women can own, operate, and fund their own solar fields and send that electricity to the grid. And it's a first of its kind in Israel. And the last one, it's on the right, is energy on peacefully resolved land. I won't go into it now. Maybe in the conversation I can elaborate a little bit longer. But there are a little bit more than 500,000 dunams in Israel that are currently legally contested land between the Bedouin community and the state of Israel. And what we've found is that solar energy can become a catalytic force in resolving some of the historic contested land issues. And that's basically what we're trying to do. And basically, what we're bringing here that's new to the table, thank you. What we're bringing here that's new to the table is the idea that Israel is, to put it lightly, a complex society with complex relationships between its different ethnic groups. And via solar energy and via other environmental initiatives, we can basically forge healthy relationships also between business and civil society and government sectors that will advance the prospects of a shared society here in Israel and hopefully lead to more important collaborations. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. So I'm going to speak about trade unions and the democratization of the just transition. So it's a different subject, but I think we can elaborate afterwards about the connections, because for sure there's interesting connections I see. So first of all, I'm very grateful for Merkaz Heschel and for the opportunity to be here today. It's the first time that an Israeli workers' organization is participating in the COP, and there's a representative of trade unions in Israel, in the Israeli delegation. And thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the vision of connecting and pushing forward this opportunity, because I think it represents the understanding that the environmental crisis is an economic crisis, is a crisis of the society. It's already affects the workers in Israel, and it's soon to be affect us more. So I'm from Power to the Workers, Democratic Workers Organization, and so who are we? We are one of the general workers organization in Israel. We are the only democratic one of the three. We are the only democratic organization. We are based on the Nordic, the Scandinavian model of democratic trade unions. We represent various sectors: transportation, bus drivers, early childhood care workers, higher education workers, social service educations, social services workers, and many more. We have 18,000 members, and we represent approximately 42 represented workers in the different sectors. The fact that we are a democratic organization means that the signing of a collective agreements and the starting and the ending of strikes have been voted, and this is a core מאפיין, a core characteristic of our work. In any given moment, we have some kind of voting going on. This is a happy moment of workers from the animal-based food industry voting about their collective agreement after a long process of struggling. So I'm here today to speak about the workers that are afraid of the struggle against the environmental crisis, the workers that are going to be affected by the shutdown of the polluted industries. So if the first picture was happy, this picture is very sad, actually. It's the case study of Haifa Chemikalim, the ammonia factory that was closed in 2017 in Israel. We represented those workers. We're speaking about a few hundreds workers whose plant was shut down due to economic circumstances, but also environmental pressures. And we're speaking about long strikes that was going on there. The plant was shut down eventually after a long struggle. And I think this is a bad case study, which we can definitely study what not to do there. So many of those workers are now without work. Many of them returned back to different polluting factories around the bay. Those workers have been living in Haifa area for all of their life. Their community is near the plant. They were feeling on themselves the implications of the environmental issues and health issues for long. While the plant owners are been making huge profits out of their works during all that time. So those workers were struggling against the closure of the plants, right? There were a lot of demonstration. Oh no, one of the most important picture is missing, unfortunately. So these workers are struggling against the closing down of the polluted industries. They are struggling for their lives, for their income, their ability to have an income. And they are not the friends of the environmentalists. Actually, they hate the environmentalists that pushing towards the closing down of the industries. The picture that is missing is the workers are firing tires with a lot of black black polluted fog around them. So it's just an anecdotic, but you can see they are not friends of the environmentalists. They are not fighting this together. And so I think they are struggling not mainly against the closure of the factory, but mostly for asking for responsibility from the factory owners and mainly from the government to take responsibility about their livelihood. So we are heading towards a decade of cleaning the Haifa Bay, the industry, the polluted industries in Israel. And I think if we're not going to be able to work together to demand the responsibility for the workers, we're going to see a lot of clashes like this. So I think there's three mainly acts that we need to do. First of all, we have to ensure a democratic and transparent process. All the workers that are going to be affected out of the situation of the closing down of the factory needs to be part of the process. They need to know in advance, in the first moment they can, what is planned for their future. There need to be active participants, all of them. When we speak about the factories, it's not only the factory workers themselves, but the workers around them in the transportation, in the catering, and many more industries that around the factories that are going to be affected and shut down, but mainly, of course, the factory workers that are going to lose their jobs. So they have to be democratic and transparent process. We have to make sure that there's a professional development programs for those who can be able to continue to participate in the labor market, but in a different industries. So we have to make sure they are being given the tools to continue participate in the labor market. For those who are too elderly or are not capable to participate in the labor market, we have to give them the social network to protect them. We have to make sure they know that when the factory is shut down, they have enough compensations to survive, them and their families and in their communities. So we have to guarantee satisfactory compensations. I think, so wait, before I continue, I think the key point is that those processes might cost money. They are not costless. If we want to do a transition from polluted industry to green industries, we cannot assume that it's just going to happen and without any price. But it's our duty to make sure that the price will not be paid by the workers. They themselves was paying the price of the polluted industries there and their community for a long time. So we have to fight together to make sure that it's not going to be on their behalf, on them paying the price. I think if we're not going to do it together in a democratic and transparent process, then we're going to see clashes, and it's inevitable. So if you're going through the labor market and thinking about the labor market during economic crisis and environmental crisis, you can see each sectors that we represent and its effects. I will not how the different sectors are affected by the crisis. We've done a lot of work in Koach La'ovdim, in Power to the Workers, to assess the influence of the crisis in the different sectors. I'm not going to elaborate now because I think Meital is going to speak a lot of that, but social services in municipality must be strengthened. Public transportation, bus drivers sector is an important sector. Each and every sector could be part of the solution, part of how we encourage the workers. So there's many things to be done. We should think of the opportunity if the labor market is changing, how we change it, push it towards a beneficial objectivity for us as a society, and for sure supporting the labor and workers' rights in the process. Thank you.
Can you hear? Yes. Okay. So I'm also going to be talking about green employment and just transition from the environmental point of view, but I really see a straight line connecting between the things that Reuma was talking about and the things that I'm going to be talking about. And it's not surprising because me and Reuma are collaborating during the years. So thank you for that. It was a great intro to the things that I'm about to talk about. So I want to start with why employment. Out of all the environmental things that we can engage to, why dealing with employment? I believe that employment is one of the most influencing factors on our identity. When we ask a person, what are you doing for a living? We mean, where do you work and in what position, in what role? And not to where do you live or how many children you have. In short, our profession is one of the most influencing factors on our identity and on the way that we perceive ourselves. And in this context, I believe that green employment is a tremendous opportunity. So what is green employment? Okay, it's a great opportunity, but what does it mean? Traditionally, when we talk about green employment, we mean professions that have a direct and positive influence on the environment. Usually we're referring to jobs such as in the field of renewable energy, energy efficiency, maybe preventive natural resources and public transportation. But as we move on to low carbon economy, meaning green economy, each and every sector in the economy has the potential to develop green jobs. From food and agriculture and up to fashion, each and every sector that you think has the potential to develop green jobs. Furthermore, in a wider perspective, as we believe in the Tel Aviv Climate Center University and in Life and Environment, in a broader perspective, we believe that all jobs that have that improve the quality of life and do not contribute gas emission are green jobs, meaning social workers, education, teaching, and even enforcing and policing. Those are all jobs that usually when we talk about green employment, it's not the first thing and not the second thing that we imagine. But as Reuma mentioned, those are definitely green jobs, especially if we look at things in a wider perspective. And those are green jobs that are already exist and usually tend to suffer from very, very bad and very poor condition working. Okay. So, indeed, the labor market is changing worldwide and in Israel as well. Thousands of new jobs are being opened each and every year, and according to the OECD, we are expected to see 10,000 of new jobs in that are considered to be green jobs in the next decade. So we're in the front of a revolution, at least an economic revolution. Take Israel, for example, only in the field of recycling. Once Israel will transfer to recycling instead of burning the waste, more than 1,000 new jobs are expected to be open in the Israeli economy. But, and you can hear the but coming, with great opportunities come great challenges, and indeed we're facing in front of a very, very big challenge. I think the biggest challenge of the environmental movement. First of all, just as much as I'm talking about thousands of new jobs that are expected to be added to the labor market, thousands of people are expected to lose their jobs. We can describe it in many ways, but in the end of the day, we know that thousands of people is gonna lose their job in the short term. In the long term, yes, we're gonna see a lot of new jobs, but in the short term, people are expected to lose their jobs, and those are not just people; those are usually low-income people. Polluting factories, often located in the periphery of Israel, will have to change the core of their business in the optimistic scenario. Yes, instead of closing, they will have to change the core of their businesses, and their employment, the one that we usually call the simple laborers, those are the ones that are gonna have to pay the price. Those are the ones that gonna have to gain the new skills, and those are skills that now they don't have. Workers in the field of electricity, animal-based food, like we saw earlier, fossil energy and more, all of them are expected to lose their job, and again, to be required for completely new skills, skills that at the moment, not only that they do not have, but the Israeli government don't have any program to train them to get the new skills. So not only that they don't have those skills, but they don't have any place that they can gain those skills, at least not a public place. And the worst part about it, the most depressing part about it, and I'm sorry from ahead, it's the Israeli preparation. I said earlier, we're at the face of a so-called revolution, at least in the labor market, but also an economic revolution, an environmental revolution. And Israel is absolutely not prepared for that. We're not sure how we're going to deal with that, and I think I can say it because this room is half empty. I don't think that a lot of people in the government are worried about that. Why is it important? Because Israel, as for today, is already one of the developed countries with the biggest socio-economic gaps between the different deciles, as you can see in the Gini index behind me. Israel is considered to be one of the countries with the biggest social and economic differences, and that means that there's a lot of people, again, usually low-income people, people that live in the periphery, that's gonna be deeply affected by those changes. So what do? We gather together a group of people coming from workers' unions, from economic research institution, and from the environmental movement, all sitting together and thinking, how can we solve this situation, and how can we lobbying the solution that we came together. And we came together to work in 3 different channels of action. The first channel is promoting and building professional training that come from the government in the field of green employment that are directed for young men and women. So each and every person in Israel that is about to begin his professional career will have the opportunity to fit inside of a green employment career with the help of the government throughout professional training, academia, and etc. The second channel is improving employment condition in existing green job. Uma was talking about it earlier, and I also mentioned there's a lot of green jobs that are already existing in the economy, but we tend to neglect them. And in many of those positions, the working conditions are extremely bad. Usually there have been usually a woman is working in those professions, and we are joining together with the workers union in order to improve the condition of the workers in professions such as public transportation, education, social workers, etc. And the third and last channel is building retaining programs for workers that are already working in the polluting factories, so they won't be harmed from the movement to the transition to greener economy. Transition that is right now definitely our biggest challenge in Israel, but in my perspective also our biggest opportunity. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mital. I'm going to build on what all the three previous speakers have said as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about climate engagement and participatory methods. We know right now a lot of governments in the world are facing this transition, and it is requiring us to engage with all levels of society. And governments cannot do it alone, and they struggle to get information, input, and even buy-in from the population. So what we are trying to do at the Center for Dialogue is to encourage governments to accelerate climate mitigation and adaptation by co-creating solutions with communities in more participatory ways. And in that way to also help reduce misinformation and make policies more responsive to what communities need. Just like we heard right now, if you're going to shut down a polluting industry, then you should be able to retrain workers and provide educational opportunities for them to find jobs that will pay at least as much, if not more, so that they continue to have a good life. So just a couple of points that we found from our research. Right now, when governments engage with citizens, it often fails to influence their decisions. We are at COP right now, and I think we were encouraged to speak our truth today. And we have noticed how many lobbyists were influencing the decisions at COP, whereas communities and civil society were not able to influence decisions as much. Oftentimes, equity-seeking voices, marginalized populations are underheard in the decision-making process, but also in participatory processes, and that needs to change, especially if we take into account the voice of workers that have been crying to be part of these discussions for a very long time. Oftentimes when climate engagement happens, it's a one-off process, and that's not sufficient to sustain a multi-decade transition that will need to happen, especially if we're thinking about industry and their shifts. So what we know from the research is that people who face trauma or who feel that they don't have a sense of agency in their lives, they can become much more open to anti-democratic populism and misinformation, and we've seen that in a number of instances in the recent years. So what we are trying to prove right now is that engagement doesn't need to slow down the process. We are in a climate emergency, but what we do with engagement is co-create the solutions with communities by understanding the values and lived experiences of people in all communities, including marginalized and underheard communities. By using science and expertise, as Misha was mentioning earlier, by also understanding the values, the networks and the advocacy that communities can bring, but also by demonstrating accountability and leadership. And again, at this COP, we have heard calls for more transparency and accountability in the process. So we're proposing 5 different approaches to climate engagement to governments. These 5 approaches don't need to happen discreetly. They can happen together. They can be made into a little puzzle in a sense to address different problems. Place-based engagement, that is going to communities to talk in their location to understand what is happening in that particular area. So what is happening in Haifa, for example, that would be place-based engagement. Deliberative engagement, this is when you engage citizens to really tackle with the trade-offs of decisions that need to be made. So if we think about retraining programs, for example, you could have citizens assembly deciding how much money a certain municipality might put towards retraining programs. Relationship-based engagement is again very similar to what Misha was talking about, working with Bedouin populations, for example. It is really working with those networks in communities to understand how they can also bring solutions forward. And then finally, large-scale engagement. This is something that happens usually digitally these days, but we're seeing also this being done in person. So this is engaging all over the country in different communities to understand, again, what are the values, what are the lived experiences, and how can we move forward. And finally, what we're interested in is systems change. And systems change is probably the hardest thing to tackle. It will require working at different levels. It will require, again, accountability, equity, understanding that we cannot leave a certain portion of the population behind. It needs to be iterative. We know a lot of these solutions, we're not going to find them right away. We will need to continue to have conversations. So just like Ruma talked about some of the workers, we need to continue talking with workers over time to understand how is their situation shifting and what do we need to adapt for them. And it needs to be sustained. Again, we cannot do one thing and then move on to the next. We need to have a sustained relationship with communities in order to be able to tackle this grave issue. So one short example from Canada that I wanted to share around workers in particular. The province of BC started a program called Clean BC, which was to reimagine the economy to be greener. The province of BC is a resource-based economy. We had forestry, oil and gas, for example. So again, high polluting industries that we were trying to phase out and still are trying to phase out. So what the province did was develop an approach to develop new jobs, cleaner jobs, but they didn't necessarily know what would be adapted to different communities, especially the ones who were rural or remote. So we worked with the provincial government to do workshops in a number of rural and remote areas to understand what the needs of the workers were in those communities, what could replace resource extraction industries, for example, and what young people were looking for as they were going into job training. And one of the workshops we did was with high school students, and it was one of the most successful workshops. The minister actually cried coming out of it because he heard directly from the voices of young people what types of jobs they wanted, the fact that they didn't necessarily want to move away from their communities, they want to stay in their communities, but they also want to ensure they can feed their families, have a good life, be able to afford a house, all these things. So I think that's an interesting approach to not only talk to workers who need to be retrained, but also young people who are coming into the market and understanding also from businesses what sort of jobs they might need to create in the years to come. So all that to say, we really believe that public participation can accelerate this transition to net zero without leaving people behind, especially the most equity-seeking communities. So really, again, this is about improving decisions. It's about maintaining public confidence, because when people feel left out, they will disengage. And it's also about working towards a future that we can build together, and recognizing that everybody has a piece of the puzzle. So this is the report we published last year. You're welcome to download it from our website, and I look forward to the discussion with the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm just taking advantage of the fact that there are no more actual presentation to locate myself in a more social way for this discussion to make, but I would really love to hear your remarks, about your work in this field of hearing other voices and deepening the dialogue, and also maybe if you have any comments about what you've heard so far.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm speaking for two of us because we are representing kind of the institution together, and at the same time, I must admit, I'm still digesting what I've heard. You know, there was a lot of input, and usually I feel, okay, now I need to sit with it for some time to weave it. But I will try to kind of weave our story into what I've heard. I can very well connect to what you shared. Maybe I start with that, Elodie. Because our institute it comes from research, but it is based on the insight that research itself provides a very limited perspective. There was a symposium of Nobel laureates in 2007, and essentially they complained that they said, how could it be we are celebrated for publishing more knowledge, but actually, does that knowledge reach those that are in need of it? Well, they certainly don't read my papers because it's read by my peers and my community. Yeah? And I'm not paid to make sure that others have access to that knowledge. So it actually increases the gap. So what's the point of continuing doing it? And the other insight, which I found even more precious, was that I said, you know, we as researchers, we have access to certain forms of knowledge, but there's so much wisdom in society that is totally disconnected from the scientific process. Yeah? It doesn't end up in peer-reviewed papers, but it is in the experience of practitioners. It is in the stories of families that they know how to do things. So that was the opening door back then for the German government to say, okay, let's create a space that experiments with different ways of relating between scientific and non-scientific knowledge. And I kind of would like to share the story that I experienced working with this institute for 10 years and how we end up doing what we're doing, and which very much relates to your thoughts about co-creation. Essentially, in the beginning, what was the assumption was, let's just bring great people from all these different perspectives together and develop solutions. But what happens reminds me a little bit of what is happening here in my own mind as I'm listening. I have listened to 4 different perspectives, which each provides. You have worked so long on these different processes, and each of them has a depth that we cannot even explore sufficiently here. And there are so many questions that would be interesting to talk about with each and every individual of one of you. Now imagine 20 people with that expertise, you know, putting into a room. After everybody has shared his expertise, everybody's super tired, yeah, and then everybody's hoping for a coffee break to have the actual meaningful conversations. So, so what we end up doing is we are experimenting with formats. What is a way that allows people from these different perspectives, not just different disciplines, etc., but different cultures, different age groups, different depths of expertise, to somehow learn from each other. And you can imagine the first time we had a dialogue in a circle, you could feel the collective discomfort crawl into the room, yeah? Because everybody, be it politicians, be it scientists, etc., is used and conditioned to relate in a certain way. So please give me my desk and my microphone and my computer, yeah? Then I share my knowledge, and now please do something with it. So the first time we did such a circle dialogue, we said, let's first listen to each other and build some relationship before we go into the depth of expertise. It was really uncomfortable in the room. So what our director back then did, he said, oh, it seems today we're doing it differently. Took off his jacket, yeah, and sat down. And that cleared the air. It was kind of, it's okay, yeah? I don't have to hide behind my desk. And that is the process that kind of brought me also out of my science background, so to say, and say, how can I help people relate to each other? How can we listen to each other in a way that it's not just every perspective is meaningful and profound, but actually there are connections between, what is the potential for mutual learning? And you mentioned in your slides relationship-based, yeah? I feel it was there, you didn't go very much into the detail of what it meant, but this is what has become our focus. My understanding so far is what can bring different perspectives together is humanness. It's not expertise or positions. And I feel a certain joy in experimenting what happens if you are serious about listening to the stories of humans before you start bringing in your position, like this is what I think is the right thing to do. This is what I think the right is to do. This is what you think the right thing is to do. What ends up is happening, people clashing with their positions. And, but somehow the atmosphere changes. If you say, okay, we are humans, we are trying to make a contribution to something. Before we share what each of us can offer, let's try to explore what is it that connects us. And then maybe I have a sense, what if the whole stuff that each of us might bring is helpful to throw into the middle so that it becomes a resource for you? And the most inspiring journey for me recently has become how that also is different between different cultures. And I mean, you're from China, I am from Germany. We represent very different cultures and histories and traditions. And at sometimes we were witnessing conversations between experts, and we were smiling. I feel you have your own memories in this moment, what were the things we witnessed. Two people talking at each other, but you feel, okay, they are not learning anything from each other. There's so much knowledge they could potentially share, but on a non-verbal level, he is communicating this, and he's communicating that, and you know, so much gets lost in that. So what I basically want to say about the co-creation, what I want to add to the different perspectives, what you have developed to your different contexts, is the real magic to me is about taking the time to listen to people. And you asked me for one example, essentially, and then I also want to come to a close. It is one thing to say, I developed something nice for somebody else, you know, and then give it to him and hope that he's making use of it. The reality we experience was politicians then tell us, well, that's a great idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't match my political reality, you know? And so we turn it kind of up the other way around, and first we say, so what is your reality? And what is your reality? We understand all of you are relevant and connected to this topic. What are your realities? And then, okay, I've understood. Is this the right question for me to ask? And once we have agreed that that is the right question from which all of us can benefit, then I can start thinking about it and develop some knowledge where I have to include everyone. Is it meaningful for you? I don't want to just work for 3 years and then give you some report and it's not helpful. But it starts with the listening and the trust building between humans. And that's often an uncomfortable process because we have to acknowledge my way of making sense of this world is totally different than the way of somebody from another continent and with different philosophical background. And that's maybe what we can tap, because my solutions may not match your reality and the other way around.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I have to say goodbye to one of our panelists, Elodie, who has to run away. I know, we really wanted to hear more.
I'd like to chat with you.
I wish I could stay longer, but I do have to go to another event. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your input.
Good luck, everyone.
All the best.
But drawing on from what you said, Thomas, in these cases, in some of these cases that were presented, it's not only just different perspectives that people are coming from. There are actual animosities. You know, in the case that Roma was describing about the workers and the factories that are being shut down, there's actual animosity between the workers and the environmentalists that are trying to promote, and also between the Bedouin societies and the government. There is distrust, there is animosity, there are you know, baggages that those people carry around that will have to be addressed in the transition. So I don't know, maybe Man, you have any insights you can give us into processes that you took part of that had animosity, that had real struggles in them, and maybe some examples of good processes.
Loaded with conflict.
Yeah, that's my expertise. Yeah, I just add up what you have said just now. When we are doing research about relationships, especially from Chinese perspective, we are saying that there are two parts in relationship. One part is functional part. The other part is emotional part. So it depends on how much we are taking emotional, how much we're taking functional. So the emotional part is more about our well-being. Look at this scope. So how much we are building relationships functionally or emotionally. I think if it's going too far with the functional side, we would be suffering a lot. But if we could combine a little bit the emotional side, we would get more and more easy and cozy. We would feel comfortable being here. So from this psychologist side, we are always saying here and now. How could we use here and now? I observed something quite interesting, that when we are doing speeches from our views, it's one super speakable guy there doing super fancy presentations, and the slides are shining, pss, 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 and with shining, charts and whatever.
Yeah, in the American, maybe people that can't see that watch us inside, we just have a window to the American pavilion that had a great party, apparently, in the United States. Climate is awesome.
Yeah. So that's about here and now. How could we take advantage of these conditions here? So are we conscious of these happenings? How could we take it in, but not as a competition? They are so fancy. Could we better? And then I would be some kind of anxious. Oh, my PowerPoint is not that good. Or is it like, oh, here is loud. Could we make us louder? So I think it's happening everywhere. About the resources, about the power, about the positions. I think that's the game really ruling our whole world and also destroying our whole world. So how could we, maybe we could stop a little bit. Ask everyone. I would stop quite soon. Yeah. I noticed. Yeah. So maybe we could take in their voices and just stop for a moment. Ask everyone here, why are you staying here? What are you want from us? And then it becomes a dialogue. And then this kind of dialogue could be more efficient. And then we know what you want and what I could give. And then it's real reciprocity. And this interactive process is which really could hold us as a whole to aim at some goal together. So that's what we are doing. So I'm not input anything, I'm just using here and now to work with people.
Thank you so much. So you brought this issue of emotion, and for me, being here in the COP, it's my second time that I'm participating in the COP. It's a very emotional experience. The first time last year, I really took it quite hard. It took me maybe a week to recover. This time I'm feeling a bit more robust. But I would like to ask Micha and Reuma, it's the first time you're participating here, and also you came from a very different angle to some of the people here. And I'm interested in asking you guys, what is your sentiment towards this event. And what do you take home with you to your work back home?
It's very confusing, I think, because we've been here for almost a week, but it's for people who don't know how it's laid out. Like most of the people who are listening, I saw there are like quite a few actually who are watching online. It's divided by country pavilions, and the main discussions that you usually see in the news, where people are coming and convening and looking over documents and negotiating the details of the agreements and how exactly things are going to be implemented. There's almost a dichotomous separation between the actual policy-based conversations that are happening and this part of the COP, which is sort of like, an environmental festival in a sense, and a celebration of basically everyone with all their best practices and all their best ideas. And if Meta thinks they have a social network, well, this is an environmental social network, the COP. And there's nothing more effective, I think, to bring people together in a simple, borderless way. You don't have to talk to someone's secretary or to send somebody an email or anyone. I mean, you're just walking around, and everyone that you could possibly need to talk to that is relevant to what you're doing and for the development of your projects or your visions or the visions of all the people around us, everyone is here. And proactively searching for it is, I think, what makes this place so special. And there's so many events that it can even be overwhelming. And it's also inspiring because, you think when you read the news that oh, well, this is actually what's happening. But then you look around and you're just like, okay, it's a hyper object. There's so much happening that it's beyond the ability to put in words and to sort of comprehend within an individual's mind. I will say that one, I think, really important takeaway that I have from this COP is it's a story I spoke about it with my wife the other day. And I was on the bus, on the shuttle, on the way back to our hotel room. And I was just listening to the conversations that were around me. And I couldn't help but notice, we're here in Sharm el-Sheikh at, the international climate conference where people are coming, with the ambition to save the world and to make solutions and to demonstrate best practices and everything. And I heard to my left a few people arguing about what is the good price to pay a cab driver for a 10-minute drive to point A to B, and another group of people that were saying, oh my God, yeah, the burger area, they ran out of French fries really early. And I'm thinking to myself, all these people came from all over the world with quite a substantial carbon footprint to make this place and this event a possibility. And yet, the things that are on people's minds are, the immediate, the day-to-day. And it's almost impossible to lehitalot, to rise above the, the Maslowist, basic needs of us as humans. And, on the one hand, I was cynical about it at the beginning, but I think it's also a really powerful demonstration of the fact that everyone who's here is a person. And we try to connect to, these big ideas and to this big global challenge that we're all here feeling like we're a part of this and also really being a part of it. And yet the solutions that we need to provide are solutions that realize, and this is maybe one of my greatest takeaways, are the solutions that realize that we're people, and people have their lives and have their needs and have their routines and have their families and have their loved ones. And by creating a better world, we're not creating something utopic. We're creating something in which people can safely and for generations on live their lives like normal human beings. That's it.
Okay. So first of all, I think it's very interesting and fascinating. Many discussions and many meetings. I have two things to take. Okay, I think first of all, in Israel, it is still the environmental issue and the environmental crisis is still considered to be a privileged topic for privileged people to discuss things and about the future, about renovation and many like things we heard around here. And I'm really hoping that the Israeli delegation had observed some of the need to discuss it as a economical and social crisis. And I think you can see it in different pavilions, and I'm really hoping that it will be observed. And I think it's a challenge to connect it. So for personally, I see things as a trade unionist. I see subject through class, and class is international. So it was very inspiring for me to see people from different countries discussing things that I deal with as a trade unionist in Israel, at closing down polluted industries and thinking about green jobs, how it is preserved in different states, or different countries, how it is discussed in Israel in our unions. So it was inspirational, and so solidarity in between communities across the world, and in opportunity to be part of something bigger. Hopefully, I will take that with me.
We're kind of coming close to the end of our time. I always sit on panels and I have questions for other people next to me in the panel. So I would like to ask you guys if you have any questions for each other. If there's anything you want to know about each other's perspectives.
A lot, but I guess my main question to us is, I mean, we haven't met before this round. What do you think is it that connects us? What do you think is it that we could learn from each other in this moment? I'm still trying to sense into what is it that connects us and that might make it a meaningful encounter for us to sit here together. I see various connections, but still I cannot really grasp it. What do you think is it? Maybe you have a sense.
Yes, I think it's working. Yes. Well, I'm not sure that this is what connects between us, but I can tell you why for me it's becoming meaningful and how it's helpful for me. I came today really depressed by this COP, and when Ronnie, you asked Micha and Reuma how are they feeling regarding the COP, I was like, yay, I'm glad you didn't ask me. I don't want to depress everyone. But you were talking and I was thinking like, what's going to happen with those chairs tomorrow morning? What's going to happen with that pavilion? Are they going to burn it? Are they going to throw it? Are we going to see a lot of waste? Probably yes. And I'm worried because I'm very aware to the Israeli government policy regarding environment and green employment, and I wish they would put the same amount of effort into environment and green employment as much as they put into this pavilion. And I think it's not only about the Israeli government. I believe that there's many people in other countries and pavilions that feel the same way. But with that being said, as I was sitting and listening to you and listening to you guys, I suddenly understand that that's okay, because the answer doesn't need to come from the government. And I understand that we are the answer. I look around, and you were talking about listening to people, and you're sitting here in the evening, can go everywhere, enjoy by the beach. We're sitting together, and we're talking about things that we do right here, right now, but also yesterday and the day before, and probably tomorrow, and all of us working each and every day in order to improve those realities that we're living in, and without remembering that nobody else gonna do our job. This is our mission, and we're gonna do it. And with all of the COP depression, I think it makes me. Yes, I'm sorry, I was crying today in other pavilion, but it does make me optimistic because I understand that. Okay, we're gonna do it. Obviously, we're here, we care, we're gonna continue doing it. And if we manage to get that far, and we still wanna do it, and we wanna get up tomorrow morning or next Sunday, Monday in every country which is not Israel, and continue, yes, and continue doing our job with even more motivated, then okay. If all of you and all of us has a reason to get up tomorrow morning and continue working, then I have a reason. And maybe that's what's connecting between us.
Thank you, Mital. And you also, you spoke before about the question of trust. And when we started, so I want to say I'll backtrack and then I'll bring us back to the trust issue. So when we started with the question, we were like, okay, like, why isn't there more participation? Why isn't there more energy participation? Why is there all these problems? And, we stood before, policymakers and bureaucrats, and, we spoke to, politicians and to different, donor clouds, and they would always ask us, so, what are the obstacles? What are the obstacles that you're facing? Why is it? So, we tried to distill the land rights issues and this issues and this technical, clause in this thing that doesn't enable participation. But all of those were always unsatisfactory. And because the underlying issue was less a technical question of being able to participate, even though there are some technical issues, but they can easily be overcome, and there actually is goodwill and faith. The real core issue is an incredible collapse of trust, and it's a collapse of trust between minorities in Israel and the government, and minorities in Israel and the rest of the country, and the Jewish majority. And it is through this collapse of trust that it is the greatest obstacle, and it is only by cultivating trust. And when we talk to people, part of the strategy is not coming and saying, okay, we have solutions, we're going to do A, B, C, D, because that's exactly what they're used to. People coming, it's sort of like this white saviorism, so to say, which is a huge problem here and in other rural development issues, where here we have this solution for you, and look how good this can be. But it's slowing down, building the relationships, and only then moving forward towards how we can really understand the issues and then work to resolve the issues, and also serve as a sort of third party that builds the trust. Because the only currency that we're lacking right now, we don't have a lack of money, there's enough money in the private sector, there's enough money in the government to advance these projects. Our currency that we're working to expand is trust. And just one anecdotal example of that is the person who started it, Joseph Abramowitz, who started the initiative. He worked for 3 years, was one of the pioneering Bedouins in this field, and he was unwilling. The landowner, his name is Musa Tarabin. He was unwilling to sign any contract. He was unwilling because once you sign a contract, you're not sure, is my land going to be utilized in a good way? Here's like, a religious Jew who's coming and he's saying like, here, I want to take your land for this energy thing. And until we build that relationship of trust, and the trust was based on no contracts, it was totally individually based, and like, he made a promise to come to all the weddings and bring a goat, and that's exactly what happened. And so thus far, we've brought 3 goats on the budget of the initiative to advance this cause. But what I'm saying is, in Israel, we're dealing with a huge collapse of trust, and what we're doing is working to create more trust. And I think if you're asking what connects us, is that I am confident that, the selected people who are on this panel, and you doing what you're doing, and all the other people here doing what you're doing, I think that there's already an inbuilt trust between us, that I know that I can reach out to you and feel comfortable to ask for your advice and to get your input and to create all these, international sort of knowledge-based shared partnerships. And I think that trust is something that is really present, at least in this part of the pavilion, maybe not in the policy part. At least in this part of the pavilion, there's a huge amount of trust. And I think that's one of the things that brings us here on the panel and the people in the crowd together.
I was speaking about no trust between workers and the environmentalists. So I'm sorry to I think trust needs to be built via responsibility and joint understanding of like facing reality, facing the fact that the struggle is difficult. So trust in between us we can build, but we should remember what we're asking for, and that it not necessarily is going to be easy to build that trust. And in my perspective, we have to remember we have the same goals, which is to ask responsibility for those in power to give it. That's it.
You say it's not going to be easy, and yet the urgency is big. Like, we have to make huge changes, and we have to make them like yesterday or the day before yesterday. But we all know that without building the trust, then they're gonna fail. So I think, yeah, there's a work to be done between, the compromise between hearing all the voices and building the trust and doing those processes properly and in a sustainable way, sustainable in a different way, but also in the right urgency of things. That's it. We are basically out of time. If there's anyone that wants maybe a question here, anyone wants? Yes.
Thanks. Actually, it's a quick comment, and just to say that my greatest concern is that you all agree with each other so much, and the problem is that to achieve the things that you want to achieve, you need to challenge power, and power is not in this room. So you might all trust each other, but at some point you're going to need to confront the Israeli government about its relationship with the Arab minority. You're going to have to confront profit-sharing power companies who don't care about their workers. And you're also going to have to confront the government about its policies, and also local government about how cities are designed. And that requires coalition building and various forms of organizing to actually confront that power in a strategic way. Because otherwise we can all agree with each other and then the decisions are made elsewhere. So my challenge to everyone is to collect your forces and create a common vision and challenge power collectively.
So, thanks for that impulse. It triggers a lot of thoughts in me. And maybe I want to connect it to the issue of urgency. Behind what you're saying, I feel there might be a certain assumption about how change happens in systems. And Elodie also spoke about, no, was it you who spoke about systems change, Micha? I'm not sure. It was Elodie, right? I'm sometimes you said challenge power, yeah? I'm sometimes worried if kind of who's we, yeah? If responsibility gets outsourced by saying we cannot do anything, or I cannot do anything as long as somebody with supposedly more power doesn't do X and Y. I was part of too many rounds where many people essentially wrote sophisticated wish lists to Santa Claus and said somebody has to take care of X and Y. I agree, like people with responsibility in governments need to be part of the conversations and need to be supported in taking their respective responsibility. Increasingly, I don't think of the government anymore, because also the government consists of people and relationships and alliances across all sorts of supposedly sectoral boundaries. I agree with you in that sense. It doesn't help us much to kind of agree and say, oh, that's nice, cool, we agree. And at the same time, I am connected with so many people in governmental positions who try to take their responsibility seriously in agencies, in ministries, etc. And that gives me a lot of hope. And that's connected to the urgency, and I very much liked what you said about that. What I take from this conversation is a lot of trust that what I do is also enough, because it's so tempting, because of the urgency, to believe, you spoke of like white saviorism, I haven't heard that term before. In psychology, we often speak of the drama triangle, you know, the victim, the savior, and the perpetrator. The urgency might prompt us to say, I have to do it all, because obviously the challenges are complex, they are big, and I am small. My contribution can only be small. And at the same time, hearing from you what you are doing and which efforts you are taking, and realizing how many people that are here take their responsibility seriously, I feel, okay, it's okay if I do my contribution, if I do my share. It nourishes my hope and the trust in the emerging collective wisdom, you could say, of a civilization that is certainly going to be very different than the civilization that has been built over the last couple hundred years, dominantly by a Western logic of how to govern things, which I have no clue how to envision it, you know? It's beyond what I can imagine at this point. But knowing and witnessing at this conference how many people are really seriously about challenging themselves and their potential to take agency, that's it. Despite all the urgency, let's take it slow and conscious and focused in my agency as part of an emerging relationship web. So I'm with you on this. I take trust from this into our shared efforts. So many things I don't have to do because other great people are doing it in their context. Yeah, thank you for allowing me to add that.
Yeah, in the very end, I just want to express my appreciation to be here. And in the very last, I just want to share that I would like to be a listener when there's other people need to speak more. I think it's also a step that we are building trust. When everyone needs to speak, could we care of those people who is silent? Yeah, I think sometimes it takes lots of courage to be the one support others and to be silent as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to unfortunately take the responsibility of the moderator of this session. And thank you all very, very much for participating. Honestly, I don't know, I feel like we've created a little intimate discussion that I would be happy to continue on furthermore, but I promised you an hour and a half is gone. So thank you all very much for staying and listening. It's very late in the clock. I thank the organizers of the Israeli Pavilion because this is their last event and you've been great and thank you so much. And yeah, I thank Shatil and some of the organizations that have worked with us to build towards this project and this day today. And yeah, we're going to come back to Israel, some of us tomorrow, some of us the day after, with trust and belief and positivity, maybe a little bit. And yeah.
And a big stack of business cards because that's.
Yeah, mainly business cards, yeah. That's it. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Ronnie.
you're very welcome.